All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So again, thank you everybody for taking time out of your busy workday to join our Lab Week Mystery Machine number 2 in a series of instruments that we'll be showcasing throughout the rest of the week. So yesterday was our presentation on RTEL PCS, Pipette Calibration System. If you missed that, we did record that session. We'd be happy to distribute that to you. A really handy tool for making sure that your pipettes are calibrated and that your laboratory staff is up to snuff on their pipetting technique. Today, we're really excited to present to you the OsmoPRO Max instrument. Tomorrow will be the GlowSight automated cell counter for CSF. Really cool instrument for making those hemocytometer slide reads a thing of the past. And then Friday, finally, we'll be presenting on the enoxamer anaerobic jar system. So super excited to showcase the rest of our instruments to you through the rest of the week. But today, really excited to talk about OsmoPRO Max and osmolality testing. So what is osmolality testing? Well, for those of you who don't know, I didn't know when I was in the lab, if I'm being blunt. Osmolality is the measurement of dissolved particles in your blood or urine. So really serum, plasma, or urine that's measured in milliosmoles per kilogram of water. So these dissolved particles can include things like sodium, glucose, and urea. And these dissolved particles may also include things like mannitol, which is a therapeutic agent, or antifreeze, so diethylene glycol, which is a toxic alcohol, toxic to people. So in normal circumstances, for your neonates, you'll have osmolality as low as 266 milliosmoles per kilogram of water. But for children and adults, it's usually somewhere between 275 and 295, with patients over 60 years reporting osmolality results a little higher, 280 to 301. And then urine, depending on what the application is for testing, that can be really all over the place, anywhere between 50 and 1200. So really wide range for urine testing there. So that's what osmolality is, but what is it used for? And it looks like I'm missing some graphics on this page. But osmolality, one of the things that it does is it gives the physician some important information about what's going on in a patient's body. So if you're overhydrated, then you can imagine the volume of water in your patient is greater relative to the concentration of dissolved particles in that patient. And then so your osmolality would go down. And if you're underhydrated, then the opposite is true. The volume of water in your patient is much lower. If you have the same amount of dissolved particles as you did in the first example, with less water relative to that amount of dissolved particles, then your osmolality result will go up. So really simple example, overhydration, underhydration. Pretty straightforward. So how do our osmometers work? We use something called freezing point depression to measure osmolality. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to cool the sample in the instrument really, really, really quickly, all the way past the freezing point, right? So we'll start cooling it until we've super cooled it. And then the freezing is initiated down there at that bottom step in the trough on the graph. And then a step occurs which releases the heat of fusion and actually will plateau the temperature of the sample at the sample freezing point. That's when we actually measure it. So how this varies with the variable levels of dissolved particles in your serum or plasma or urine can be easily compared to, something, at least here in New England, that we experience every winter, throwing salt on the road, right? If you throw salt on the road or dissolve more salt into the water that wants to freeze on your sidewalk or on the road, then you're changing the freezing point and you're allowing it to become a liquid so that you can go ahead and clear that off the walkway. You don't have to worry about slipping when you take the dog out. So pretty straightforward example. What are some of the things that it helps with? I think the most critical thing that it helps with is toxic alcohol ingestion. And I'm not talking about ethanol. I'm not talking about somebody who's went to the bar and has had a few too many drinks. We're talking about toxic alcohols like the example I used in the opening slide, diethylene glycol, methanol, isopropanol, something like that. So in the U.S., and this data is a little bit old, but in the U.S., according to the National Poison Data System, there were about 7,242 cases of ethylene glycol poisoning and 1,607 cases of methanol exposure. So that's quite a few patients. This is, a lot more common than some of us might expect. If the consumption of one of these toxic alcohols is improperly diagnosed, this could lead to permanent organ damage, organ failure, or even death. So really bad news, and it's really important that we act quickly to treat these patients. So where does osmolality come into all of this? If you look at the graphic on the left side of the screen there, that calculated osmolality accounts for things that you will test for on your chemistry analyzer: sodium, glucose, blood urea, nitrogen, and ethyl alcohol. But what's important about measured osmolality as compared to your calculated osmolality is that it's going to measure a difference, or it's going to capture things like a toxic alcohol that your patient has ingested that you won't capture in what's included in the calculation of your calculated osmolality. So what your provider will do is they'll order an Osmol Gap. So they'll have you measure osmolality on an osmometer, much like the OsmoPRO Max, calculate the osmolality using results from your chemistry analyzer. A lot of times the LAS will just have this built in, so it takes the results and creates the calculation on the back end. And then it will take the difference between your measured osmolality and the calculated osmolality to calculate what's called an osmolar gap. So if this osmolar gap is less than 10, then the provider can say, all right, it's likely that there's really nothing in the measured osmolality that's overwhelmingly different from what we've calculated in the calculated osmolality that can lead us to believe a patient may have ingested a toxic alcohol. But if it's greater than 10, then they will investigate that route and determine whether or not a patient did ingest a toxic alcohol, using that as evidence, and potentially put the patient on dialysis and provide them with the appropriate treatment to help digest whatever may have been ingested and clear that from their bloodstream. Another really common application of osmolality, probably the most common application, is hyponatremia. So that's just simply defined as low sodium. It's really common in geriatric hospital wards, also relatively common in non-geriatric wards, and really common in the intensive care unit. So serum osmolality measurement is a really critical tool at determining true hyponatremia from fake or pseudo hyponatremia, right? Which is the distinction you're seeing over here on this cascade of testing on the left side of the screen. So once that low serum sodium has been detected, we'll go ahead and measure the serum osmolality. And then based on what the result is there, we can distinguish true hyponatremia from pseudo-hyponatremia. And then we'll go ahead and we'll rely on the urine osmolality result to determine if the water excretion of the patient is impaired or normal, and then cascade down through a list of possible treatments based on the urine sodium results. So a really helpful tool at really narrowing things down on knowing what the most appropriate treatment is for these patients with hyponatremia. Okay. So now we know what it is. We know what it can be used for. Here's another long list of different things it can be used for. I mean, it's just really applied very broadly across many different practices, primarily nephrology and emergency medicine with those toxic alcohol ingestions, but it can also be used as a QC mechanism in the pharmacy. It can be used in a water deprivation test to diagnose diabetes insipidus. Just broadly, it is a very useful tool that you might see ordered by a number of different providers. You've already heard me talking. I guess I'll briefly introduce myself before we get into the demo. My name is John Flasher. I'm a senior clinical product manager here at Advanced Instruments. My product responsibilities include the OsmoPRO Max, but are expanded to all of our osmometers. And if you're tuning in to the rest of the Lab Week events, you'll see me again on Friday for the Anoximat demo as well. So that said, without wasting much more time, we'll get right into this very cool instrument. So at a high level, a little bit about the OsmoPRO Max is that for Advanced Instruments, it's a first of its kind, excuse me, fully automated multi-sample osmometer. And what I mean by fully automated is that it will run primary sample tubes. So you see this nifty turntable here. It has 20 samples. We'll give you a nice look at it from above here. It has 20 positions to accommodate 20 samples on the turntable. That will allow for continuous testing. So you can continue to load your primary sample tubes on. And when I say primary sample tubes on, I mean almost any primary sample tube that has serum, urine, or plasma. So if you can imagine your gel tubes or your red top serum tubes, your SSTs, this turntable is specifically made to accommodate a vast variety of heights and widths and volumes of your primary sample tubes for serum, plasma, and urine. And you can go ahead and continuously test up to 20 samples at a time. As tests finish on the turntable, you can offload samples and load more samples. And you can keep doing this, excuse me, until you hit up to 500 tests. Excuse me. And then once you hit that 500 test mark, you'll perform what's called a Max 500 kit. And what's in the Max 500 kit is a bottle of system fluid, is a vial of enzymatic cleaner for cleaning out the fluidic pathway in the sample chamber on the instrument, and 2 peristaltic pump replacement lines. So this is really your primary consumable that you're going to be using for performing your 500 test maintenance. And when you do that, you'll simply be changing out the system fluid, dumping out anything that you have in the waste container, and then replacing 2 little tubes that clip right into these little peristaltic pump housings on the side of the instrument, as well as running a small vial of enzymatic cleaner. The enzymatic cleaner can also be found in a 5-pack as well as a 30-pack for a recommended daily cleaning at the end of each shift as well. So as I was mentioning before, we do allow for the continuous testing of up to 500 primary sample tubes. But if you do have a short sample, we also offer a small volume insert kit. So you can actually put these little small volume inserts right into the top of your primary sample tube so that the instrument can recognize your patient identifier from the barcode on the sample tube itself. And then we actually have liquid level sensing technology that will be able to detect where the top of the liquid is in the small volume insert and go down to a depth that will allow it to adequately aspirate exactly 190 microliters. So minimum volume of 190 microliters in that small volume insert in the primary sample tube, because we want to make sure that we accommodate for a bunch of different shapes and sizes and lengths and volumes that can be present in the tube. We require about 480 microliters to be present, but from those primary sample tubes, we'll still only aspirate 190 microliters for testing. So that's what you're going to use for each test. Okay. Also with this instrument, you do have the option to use protanol and renal controls. The protanol is supposed to capture a range that you might expect in serum and plasma. The renal, a much broader range for that which you would expect in urine. We also have this handy calibration kit. So the days of individually purchasing each of your levels of calibrators are over. So with the OsmoPRO Max, what's really cool is we have this RFID detecting technology. So we have this tag that's actually present on the box itself. And then if you look at the instrument, you'll see this symbol that matches the symbol on the back of the box. So all you do is go into the calibration menu on the instrument. You would hold this symbol up to that which is on the instrument. And I can actually show you what that might look like here by navigating through the menu quickly. Oops. Almost lost my microphone there. So I'm going to go ahead and just scan into the system here. So you can actually see on the screen, as soon as I initiate the calibration, it's going to tell me, hey, hold the symbol on the back of your box up to the matching symbol on the instrument. And then it's going to take me step by step and tell me exactly what I need to do next. So first hit load, hold the symbol up. Once completed, scan the UDI barcode, so the barcode that will identify which lot of calibrator that we're using. Next, scan your Clinitrol 290 because we have to run a control with calibration as well. And then the next step after that, and I'm not going to go down that road right now because we don't have enough time, but the next step after that will be a step-by-step instructional frame-by-frame video, just like the one you're seeing on the left side of the screen, which will actually show you where to load each of your calibration standards, exactly what positions, using which tube adapters, and how they should be organized from the highest level all the way down to the lowest level for the calibration procedure. So it really takes the guesswork out of setting up your calibration test, as well as performing your Max 500 maintenance step as well. All right, we're going to zoom back out here. So just like we did on the calibrator kit, this Max 500 kit has the same symbol. It'll take you through step-by-step instructions on changing your system fluid, changing your peristaltic tubing, emptying your waste container, as well as performing that enzymatic cleaning step. So really intuitive user experience. In addition to that, I just wanted to come in here and show you a couple of other really cool features. So I mentioned every 500 tests, you have to change out that Max 500 kit. So if you look at the bottom left-hand side of the screen there, you'll see the little green teardrop with the number 461 next to it. That's because that's counting down from 500 from the last time that I actually changed out the Max 500 kit. And we'll count down. It'll turn yellow once we get a little bit closer. And then once we get down below 25 tests, it'll actually turn red, indicating that we should probably change that Max 500 kit out soon. Once you reach the end of that limit, it actually won't let you test anymore until you perform the testing. Next is the QC indicator. You have to perform QC every 24 hours, at least every 24 hours as a requirement on this instrument. You designate which time of day you want to perform it. So if your core lab techs come in at around 7 or 8 in the morning, you can schedule your daily QC for around 7 or 8 in the morning. It actually won't let you run any testing after the designated time until that QC testing is performed. And that's what that number is right there in the green QC circle, is the amount of hours I have until I actually have to perform QC again. The next symbol is going to be our LIS connectivity symbol, which I don't have set up here in the demo room. And then we have some helpful information here. So we actually can see all of the different indicators that you might see pop up in the regular use of the instrument with the little question mark symbol. And then in this menu, I really want to show you something cool. If we go into settings, we can create different user profiles using the menu at the top right. But if we go down here to configuration, and we go ahead and I'll go ahead and show you how easy it is just to scan into the system. Once you've selected a user, you really just take your badge, go ahead and scan in. You can see some of the permissions that you can allow for the operators of your instrument if you have an admin profile. But here you can actually also change the number of replicates that you are going to be performing for each sample. So the days of creating 2 aliquots so that you can perform duplicate osmolality testing on your serum or your urine or your plasma, that's over. So if you have your primary sample tube, you can go ahead and load it right onto the turntable, and you can tell the instrument, hey, for every sample I run 2 tests. Not only that, but you can go ahead and select this box that says retest if out of spec, and you can set an acceptable spread between those 2 results. So if you want to avoid any outliers crossing over into your LIS, you can set this spread to 4 or 3 or maybe even 2 so that you can tell the instrument, hey, if these 2 results on the same sample are outside of a range of 2 milliosmoles per kilogram of water, then I want you to retest. So we'll go ahead and retest, and then it will flag which result is the outlier, and then we'll actually only transfer the results that are closely related to each other or within your designated spread over to your LIS for your approval to send back onto your physician. You can do the same thing for controls down here as well. This menu here is where you're actually going to schedule the timing for your daily QC. And this menu here is where you're going to set the acceptable range limits for QC performed outside of that 24-hour period. So here, if you perform QC maybe every 8 hours or every 12 hours, and you want to perform it more than on a 24-hour period, the instrument's going to recognize when you load the Clinitrol 290 ampule adapter and know that you're running QC. And when it does that, it's going to be testing against whatever range that you set on this menu. So if I say, I want to issue a warning if my QC results are outside of 2 SDs. If you run your Clinitrol 290 at any time during the day and your results come in at outside of 2 standard deviations of the C of A, certificate of analysis for that lot of Clinitrol 290, then it will issue a warning. If I don't want my text to use it anymore, if it's outside of that range, then I'll just select this stop running button. So a couple really cool features in the settings menu. And no, we're not going to save all of that stuff that I've already changed that you might find really useful. Another thing that's great about the user interface of this instrument is the results menu. So when we go into the results menu, you can see all of the testing that has been performed in a given amount of time. What's really cool about this too is I can go ahead and select a few of these results. Let's say I'll select the last 5 or 6, why not? And then you can see all these different buttons down here along the bottom of the screen. The export button will actually let you export it to a USB. So there's a USB port on the bottom right-hand side of the instrument. Although I have 3 camera angles, I don't have a really good camera angle for showing you what that looks like, but it is down there on the bottom right side of the instrument. Once a USB is plugged in, or it could be a jump drive, or it can be an external hard drive, or it can be plugged directly into a laptop. Once that's plugged in, if you hit the export button, it will actually export the data that you selected out into the USB. Additionally, you can hit this button here that says statistics, and it will pop up some statistics onto the screen. So I've got a good mean on all of these results that were all Clinitrol 290, by the way, of 291.3 milliosmoles per kilogram of water, a standard deviation of about 1, and a coefficient of variation of about 0.35%. So a really handy menu there. Another thing that I love as a former medical laboratory scientist myself is this controls log. Anything that helps me keep track of the inventory of controls and reagents that I use for any instrument is welcome for me. On this instrument, all that I have logged in there is the lot of Clinitrol 290 that I'm using. But what's great about any active lot on this instrument is that you can go ahead and select that lot. You can see there are a bunch of different options down here that you can perform. So you could add another lot of Clinitrol 290 or a calibration standard. You go ahead and delete something that you no longer want in your log if it's taking up space and you've added a bunch of other controls that are otherwise active now. Or you can go over here to where it says chart. What's cool about this menu is it will actually produce a Levy-Jennings chart for you using every QC test that's been performed on that lot of Clinitrol 290. So as you can see, I can also set an acceptable range for my quality control performance on this lot of 290. I can also choose which date range I want to include in what's plotted on the table. But down here, I can actually toggle the SD bands. So if I want to just see results within 2 standard deviations, I can do that. And within 1, I can even do that. So it is a really handy tool for seeing the overall performance of your quality control samples and ensuring that everything has fallen within spec for you over a given amount of time. So really cool tool as well. All right. Now, with that said, I'd be happy to announce to the group here as well, because I really got right into it without telling you probably the most exciting part of this whole presentation. And it's that we're randomly, for one of the attendees here at this Lab Week event, going to be selecting somebody to receive a customized Lab Week lab coat that we will, once we confirm the winner, send to you at your laboratory location. So sorry for not mentioning that very exciting detail in the beginning, but that is something that we're going to be doing at the end of the call today. But with the last few minutes that we have here in this very quick 30-minute session, I just wanted to open it up for any questions from the folks on the call so that we could address those as well. Can the microtainers be placed on the sample rack? No, they need to be placed on the top of either a primary sample tube or a glass tube in the rack. So they need to be held in position by something. And they can't be directly placed on the top of the sample rack. It's too wide for the microtainer tubes. Mm-hmm. Can this analyzer be interfaced to an LAS? Yes, it has bidirectional LAS connectivity. Is it possible? Oh, that was a great question. So another question that was asked is it possible to wirelessly transfer the QC data to the advanced QC peer review program? So we actually have a web-based platform that lets you compare your QC performance to that of your peers. And yes, the OsmoPRO Max has a really cool feature that will let you actually transmit that data right to that web-based platform. So you can easily upload that without having to do it manually and compare results to your peers who are using the same instruments and quality control. Really good question. Right. All right. If we have no other questions, oh, we have one more question. Okay. Can we print data like control QA? You can export any of the quality control data. Sorry, we'll go ahead and take a look at the user interface again. So if I go to the controls log, we can print, I'm sorry, I have to scan in here. We can print anything that we chart here. Or you can export it as well. I'm sorry, you can only export the LJ plot. And then from the results log, you can print your control data that will be identified because, again, you're going to be using that Clinitrol 290 ampule adapter. So each time you run a control, it will identify that as a control run because you're using the Clinitrol 290 ampule adapter. So if you did just want to select a number of results and not the ones that I canceled earlier, to print, you can go ahead and do that as well. This print button will highlight when you have a printer connected. I don't have a printer connected here in the demo room, but you can easily go ahead and just print that information right out onto that printout. Yeah, and I will say that the printer is not built into the instrument. It does need to be purchased separately. All right, if that's the additional question, then we'll go ahead and announce the winner of the lab coat. Christy. And that's going to be Christy Long. So congratulations, Christy Long. Thank you for attending, and we'll make sure we follow up with you on your information so we can go ahead and send you your customized Lab Week lab coat. Thank you so much for attending. Congratulations on winning the lab coat. And thank you everybody else who attended the OsmoPRO Max Lab Week webinar. Super excited about this instrument. I hope you're excited too. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or reach out to your local rep and we'll answer them accordingly. Thanks so much, everybody.